Right, so welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to the Summer Gardening Talk series presented by the East Flagstaff Community Library's Seed Library in partnership with Grow Flagstaff Seed Library, a part of the Master Gardener Program and the Coconino Cooperative Extension Office for the University of Arizona, and also in partnership with Native Americans for Community Action's Lasting Indigenous Family Enrichment Program. This program is being recorded and will be posted later to the library's social media accounts and any partner accounts we deem appropriate. Your faces and names will not be shown on the recording. However, if you do choose to speak aloud, your voice will be on the recording. Please keep this in mind. Your participation in this event equals your consent and agreement to the above terms. Thank you. I am now pleased to introduce to you our speaker for today's gardening talk, Jackie Alston. Jackie Alston has been gardening and farming in the Flagstaff and Verde Valley since 2005 and 2015, respectively. She is the co-editor of the Gardening Etc. column, a Coconino Master Gardener, founder of the Grow Flagstaff Seed Library, development specialist for the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, children's author, and the mother of 3 remarkable humans. She honors those whose land she now calls home, including the Hohokam, Hopi, Western Apache, Pueblo, and Dene peoples.
All right, thank you, dear. It's good to see names, and please feel free to participate. And I will try to pull up the presentation. We'll see. These storms have my internet being kind of funky, so I hope it works out. Is everyone able to see that so far? You're welcome to put it in the chat if you can see that. All right. Well, I'm not used to not having a lot of participation in these presentations I do. Oh, I got the chat now. Let's keep that open. Looks great. Thank you, Leslie. All right. So I'm not used to not having a lot of participation. I see thumbs up. Thank you. So if I get a little bit chatty and conversational, I apologize, and it doesn't work for you with it being recorded. So I apologize in advance. I'm still, after 2 years or 2.5 years of being used to Zoom, I'm still not using Zoom. I'm still not used to it. So today we're going to talk about seed saving. Now, seed saving, obviously, from what you heard from the bio that Michelle read, is that I really love seeds. And they're an important part of not just my life, but all of ours. When we think about the food we eat, the plants we enjoy around us, seeds are the base of everything, right? So I love this quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. It says, "The creation of 1,000 forests is in one acorn." And think about it, the ability for a seed to duplicate itself is phenomenal. It's just the perfect system. And I don't think I have it in this presentation, but my husband and I sometimes will count seeds and things like tomatoes, and you figure a tomato has like over 500 seeds, a regular beefsteak tomato. That is kind of the genius of seeds, how fast they can go, is that they can propagate like that. Okay, it's kind of got a delay here, so I'm getting ahead of myself. Whoops. All right, well, we're just going to start here then. So let's just talk a little history about seeds. So back since the beginning of agriculture, and we're not sure when that is, but that could have been about 12,000 years ago, seeds have been saved. That was when we saw things that people like wheat. We have archaeological evidence that wheat was saved, reused. One example of that would be in the Bible, where it talks about Joseph being sold into Egypt. He saved grain seeds for 7 years of famine and for the people to replant. So here's one example. So this is a picture my husband and I took when we were at the Chelsea Physic Garden in London a couple years ago before everything shut down and COVID wasn't a thing at that point. But one great example of a seed saver was Nikolai Vavilov, and in that garden, there's a lot of things that from that many years ago have been seeds that have been saved. And there are some examples in there of Nikolai Vavilov. So he was a Soviet botanist and geneticist, and he was a great seed saver. Maybe not the greatest seed saver ever, because this is just back as far as our history goes with our culture in the U.S. Anglo-Saxon U.S. now. But what we do know is that he collected 250,000 to almost 500,000 seeds. This, I think, his number is even higher than 360,000. Not just seeds, but roots and fruits from all over the world. And then he stored them in a seed bank in St. Petersburg underground. He also developed a center of origin theory, which I guess the picture's not in here right now, where he said that certain plants, certain vegetables were centered in certain areas all over the world. Sorry, I can't figure out how to go back. Let me try this. See if I can just get back, because he's an interesting fellow. Okay, so I don't see the map, and I don't want to risk it again with the internet. So let's just talk what happened to his seed. So first of all, his center of origins were, say, for example, in Kazakhstan. Apples were originated from there, and he had these radiations of where food came from, certain parts all over the world, and they would concentrate, and then varieties would build in that area, and then they would spread. And so that we would have things like an apple from Kazakhstan, and that would spread all over the world, and different varieties all over. Same with the Fertile Crescent, where we have grains. Grains would extend from that area all over the world after a point. So he believed that these plants would evolve and be bred, so original plant breeding, in all these different areas where they originated, where they were from, and then they would extend to other areas. But unfortunately, he was born in a really hard time, and he was the one that Stalin decided to blame on the famine that was happening in 1943, 1942 in Russia at the time, the Soviet Union. So he was thrown in a gulag in Siberia. But while he was taken there, during that time, it was during the 100-day siege in St. Petersburg, and the seed vault was bombed. And really, a lot of the theories are that it was bombed because it was under siege because they were trying to get to this 360,000 different varieties that Vavilov had underground. And unfortunately, a lot of the botanists that worked for Vavilov and worked in that depository barricaded themselves in so that people couldn't get to the seeds as they were sieging, plus people were starving above and didn't have just normal resources. So they barricaded themselves in. 6 of them died of starvation, surrounded by things like potatoes and beans, rather than lose those varieties that were only housed in that location and would have been lost to us currently today if it wasn't for their perseverance to protect the area. That whole repository survived with minimal damage, and today we have a lot of that variety that came through there. There is a great book, if you want to know more about him, called Where Our Food Comes From by Gary Nabhan, and it's a great book. It's a quick read, and just the history and the drive that Vavilov had to save seeds is really inspiring, because we see how important it was, and even in just, what is that, 60 years ago, what the impact he has had on our food system by saving the seeds that he did. So seed saving is important. So why save seeds for a library? Why save seeds at all? We're going to talk about this. These are some of the big reasons people save seeds. First off, it helps us adapt our seeds to local climate. Climates are erratic, as we're seeing with flooding, extreme heat, fires, the things that are happening around us every year it seems to get more and more erratic, and we're seeing climate change. However, if we are growing our seeds out year after year in the area where we live, then we're adapting them to the area. They're becoming this genetic repository of information of how to deal with erratic behavior or with changes. They might not be able to do extreme climate drastic change. Can everyone hear me now? Can anyone do a thumbs up if you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. For some reason, my phone just cut out and another phone call clicked on it. So I lost my sound. Right. So adaptation of seeds in local areas, it's important. It's able to bounce back. They're able to hold that transmission of that information. And year after year, that transmission is passed to the next generation so that we can adapt to things. And we see that with seeds that have been grown in the area for decades, for hundreds of years in some cases, like we have in some of these seed libraries. And even though that information might not be expressed, it is in there, right? And so year after year, it's important that we save those seeds. All right, so also, there's no need to buy seeds, which can get expensive, and especially if we're talking about buying plants. I know that if you buy a package of seeds, that's $3 or $4. If you can go to a seed library and exchange them, or a seed exchange or a seed library, that becomes at no cost, correct? And so it becomes a cheaper way, or a cost-effective way to get seeds. Plants themselves are like, what, $5 for a seedling. So it's a better way to do it if you can learn the techniques of starting seeds and saving seeds, right? It's a more cost-effective way. Sharing. So this is one of my favorite ways, is that reasons I save seeds is I love hearing about people's successes. There is a Hubbard squash that we keep at the Grow Flagstaff Seed Library that is, like a medicine ball shaped squash. And some farmer found the seeds, I don't know, 100 years ago, almost 100 years ago, in a cave, in a pot from, I'm sure probably the Sonawa people or an indigenous person or group at one time. I'm not even sure where it was. I thought it was here in Flagstaff, but somewhere in the Four Corners, and started growing out these seeds. And they're the best tasting seeds, plus growing seeds. They don't need a lot of water. And they are really prolific, and they get a huge, thick skin in them that's really sweet, and it's better than a pumpkin in a lot of ways, and I use it for a lot of recipes for a pumpkin. So that squash is one great example. Another one are the brand of seeds, that the pinto bean seeds that used to grow out in the park. Year after year, those were saved. Those are well adapted to our area as well. Granted, we have erratic systems right now, but they're better equipped than some seeds that have come from China or other places. A lot of times, seed companies now, we don't even know where their seeds have been grown unless they specifically say that they grow them on their specific farm or their growers. Most of the time, their seeds can come from anywhere. So sharing seeds helps us be more successful, and it helps our friends and fellow gardeners be more successful by sharing those seeds. Resiliency, it's a great way, and in some cultures, it's the only way to preserve cultural heritage. Seeds are sacred in many cultures, and it creates this cohesion. Corn, as you know, in a lot of the indigenous wonderful cultures around our community here in Flagstaff and the Four Corners, corn is sacred. A lot of times beans and squashes are as well. And so it creates this resilience. There are stories, sacred stories, that are only passed on by familially through their families, that are shared that way through saving seeds. It also preserves genetic diversity. So in 1903, there was let's see if I have it in here. There was an article about about all the different varieties of vegetables there were. And this list of all the different, in National Geographic in 1984, 85, there was an article about all the different varieties that they knew of vegetables in 1903. And it was huge, the amount of variety. Now, a lot of those might not necessarily be extinct, but they have been lost. And so slowly, they're finding like a lot of these families have kept these seeds. So it's about 90%. If you go to the grocery store, you can get a handful of different kinds of vegetables versus what you could get in 1903. And I don't know that this video will work, but if you ever get a chance, and I can put this in the chat later or send a link later, of glass gemmed corn, where it talks about how that variety came to be. And it's pretty remarkable. It's given to one man who of Cherokee descent who saved these seeds, and he felt called upon to do it, and he saved these beautiful seeds that now have something like over 10,000 followers on Facebook because it's such a beautiful corn. But he saved those seeds and he would select for a specific variety until he got these beautiful glass gemmed seeds. So here's that diagram I was showing you, or just talking about the different varieties that were listed in this National Geographic. It's an infographic in National Geographic in 1985 of all the different varieties that thought existed. Actually, I think this one's from an article in 1991 in there. But we've gone down. If you look at beets, 288 variety of beets are now down to about 17. So you can see this bottleneck that's happened with the diversity in our food. Simply because people stopped saving seeds. And a lot of seeds have now been bought up by other companies, as you know. So here it is. This is another one that came up. So the one above is from the 1999 Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. They figure the number is about at 90% have disappeared from farmers' fields. And that's where you can find that article. Oh, I did put the tomato thing in here. Okay, so here are my husband's hens. So how many seeds can you get from one plant? I already kind of gave this joke away where we had over 500 with just one of those beefsteak tomatoes. So I find that the biggest problem with saving seeds for people is it just feels daunting. You don't know you're not sure you know what you're doing. You get nervous. You think that it's going to be difficult. What if you make a mistake? But all you can do is try. You just try a few different things and see if it works. Because what happens if you make a mistake? Well, your mistake is edible, right? And it's also could be fun. You might come up with something really fun. I know plant breeders who deliberately cross things just to get some crazy things like pumpsinis, which would be a pumpkin and a zucchini, and mix the two, or delicatas that are Della acorn cotta's, because they find it fun and they get interesting different varieties. And after about 7 to 10 generations, they might even have their own variety of fruit that they can go with. So tonight, I'd kind of like to talk about 5 different groups of plants that you can try to save seeds from, so that you could have some success and get your confidence in saving seeds. And I'm no expert by any means, but I do love saving seeds. And that's really why I started the seed library in Flagstaff, because I found that I became a seed hoarder and had so many seeds that I needed to share them, because I just was having so much fun learning to save seeds. Plus, just even buying packets, right? Since they have more seeds than you could ever need as just a home gardener. So first of all, a few little terms. So open pollinated, that's what we're talking about. And most seeds that we buy deliberately, we'll look at them and they'll say open pollinated. Well, all that means is that they're true to self. That means that there's uncontrolled breeding going on, and those plants are able to breed within their variety. So they're true to their breeding. Cross-pollinated, those are plants that like cucumbers or squash or melons, broccoli, that they need another plant to cross with. And that's required by some plants to actually even produce fruit. They need to be cross-pollinated. So, like with corn, those of you that have grown corn know that you need a lot of corn, because it's wind-pollinated and they need to mix to be able to fertilize each one of those silks that go down into an actual ovary, right? Okay, so GMO, so that's genetic
genetically modified organism, or as a lot of us like to say, transgenic, which makes more sense to say transgenic. Joel Salatin calls it that because, I mean, what is hybridizing? What is sorry, I'll get back to hybrid in a minute. But what is plant sex but crossing of genetic material, right? So it's misleading when people say GMO. Usually we know what what they are talking about now because we use that for things that have been engineered with other organisms. But even within species, there is genetic modifying going on, right? So when we see that it says GMO, now that means that it's been crossed with another thing, like a tomato with a pig. You know, there have been some genetics that have gone into in unnatural ways, usually in laboratory settings, to create a different kind of organism. So that's what GMO now means, and transgenic. Heirloom is basically just open pollinated, but has stories with it. So when you see a tomato in sprouts and it says heirloom, and they're usually lumpy and funny, it's really an open pollinated tomato unless they're telling you a story about it, which there could be stories with those beefsteaks like that. The ones that I grow, the heirloom, lumpy ones like that, there are stories, but they're usually stories of friends that have passed down those stories to me. So that's heirloom. Landrace, I know plant breeders that focus on landrace, and what they're doing is they're using traditional practices of crossing to create a specific variety of seed that they want, or a vegetable plant. So they do that for agricultural purposes, and it's really just open pollinated on a larger scale. So hybrid is not true to parents. That doesn't mean that it's sterile. Like a lot of people think, well, if I put just the melons that I grew, the seeds the next year, I put them in the ground, they won't grow because it's probably a hybrid melon. Well, they will grow. They just might not taste like that melon you really liked last year, which I've done this before. I've just taken like a honeydew that was really, really sweet and I loved it. And I saved the seeds just to see what would happen and planted them the next year. And it tasted like nothing. It was almost like worse than like the worst cucumber, had no flavor, you know? So that happens. So you're just letting things mix past parents of the F1 generation. So these are the varieties that let's talk about that to try, not varieties, but groupings of plants that are less likely to cross so that you can have some great success. Let me look in the chat. Are there any questions so far? I really kind of flubbed the first part of that and did not. I think I got nervous, maybe nervous not seeing your smiling faces. So I kind of stuttered through that first part. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to either speak up or put them in the chat, and I'll answer those right now before we go on to the groups of plants you can grow. All right, I don't see any questions. So moving on. Thank you for letting me know you're good. I appreciate that. All right, tomatoes. All right, so first of all, there are 3 categories of saving seeds. So we can save things that have wet, a wet seed casing around them in their plant. So more like they're actually fruits, right? Semi-wet, also fruits that may not have like the casings around like the tomatoes, but we save them by having to dry them out. And then dry. So the dry method obviously is the easiest, although the other ones aren't very difficult either. So one way to do this is just letting nature go its course, right? Leaving the beans, leaving the peas, leaving the lettuce on the vine, on the plant, and letting them just dry out, and then harvesting them when they're ready. Another way, because we live in a really short growing season, that we can do is pull the plant out of the ground and hang it upside down to dry. We can do this in our garage. We can do this in our house, just somewhere that's not very humid and there's really low lights, so that they can just dry and be on their own. And then we'll take them apart afterwards. We want to eliminate as much moisture as we can, as fast as we can, without just desiccating it, right? Because even though it's going to dry, it's still a living organism. So another way you can do is pick seed pods and dry them on the racks. So my husband made this thing for me where it's just hardware cloth and they're framed around, and so that I can lay all the beans in one single layer so they can dry out that way so that they don't freeze out on the vine at the end of the season when if I have a late crop. And then if I just leave airflow around, then they'll be fine. They will get moldy. Sometimes I try to push too many in, especially scarlet runner beans. I'll try to cram too many of those big beans in there and they will get moldy. But if I can keep the airflow, that's a great way to save those seeds. So this is a great way to save beans, a lot of herbs, lettuces, and then root vegetables, even, and flowers. We'll talk about root vegetables in a minute. There is a couple things you have to do there. So let's talk about first lettuce. So, we get so frustrated in June how hot it gets around here, and our lettuce it bolts. But really, what we can look at it and flip that on its side and have a positive thing about it. It's like, oh, as soon as we get those little fluffy, wind-blown seed umbrellas on them, then the umbels on the top, then that way we know that our seeds are ready. And so you can take a Ziploc bag out here and just hook it around those little fluffy seed heads on your bolted lettuce. And then once you trap it inside the Ziploc bag, just crunch it up just a little bit and you'll pull off the fluff, and there'll be the heavier seed at the bottom of that fluff. And you can see it in that picture there. Right there is the seed in there. So, and then if you don't like all that fluff and the messy chaff with the seed, you can gently blow on that, either in your hand or even sometimes in a Ziploc bag, and that will release the lighter stuff, like the wind pollinator umbrella and all of that, and then that way you'll have left is your seed, and it's already packaged in your Ziploc bag. So beans, we already kind of talked about beans and peas. Peas are the same as the beans. You're just letting them dry, or you can dry them on racks. And this is a great chili, a very colorful chili I got to make one time, just with beans fresh out of the garden. I do love fresh beans, but they can't always be fresh, right? So dried beans, they serve dual purposes where you can save them for your seeds and you can eat them in the same pot that you are or same container you're saving them for next year. And then just put a little off to the side for next year. All right, so herbs. Herbs are the same kind of thing. You just let them dry on the vine or just hang them upside down. And this works for mint. Tarragon is actually kind of hard to save seeds from because they're usually sterile. And I didn't know this until a couple of years ago, that just seed heads on French tarragon, at least. Is it Russian tarragon? There's another tarragon that does produce seed. Bay laurel, I don't know any of us that grow laurel in Flagstaff. It's a very warm weather one, but thyme, you save seeds that way. Oregano, it's really easy just to snip off a dried flower head. My neighbor doesn't know it, but I just stole some of her seeds last year when she asked me to water her garden. And I have the best oregano this year because I took some of her seeds. And so those are really easy things to save seeds from. Just usually most of these herbs actually have a stalk with a seed head. So they're really easy just to snip those off at the end of the season. And there's another great thing about cilantro. When it bolts, now you can save the seeds and you have coriander and seeds for next year. All right, grains. Grains are something people don't really think about putting in their backyard garden, but just doing a small plot of wheat, so like white Sonora wheat is the one in the middle picture and off to the right, is a really easy seed to save. It doesn't require a lot of water, and just a little bit can bring you beautiful loaves like that one that my husband baked from grains we grow. It does take a huge amount to save for to be able to have a lot of loaves of bread, but just for a little 10 by 10 plot, you can provide some bit of grain for your bread. All right, the semi-wet method. This method we use for our pumpkins and our melons, squash, and it's really simple. It sounds like it would be complicated, but it's not. You're just gutting it like you normally would, and you're just setting those seeds out to dry. And there is casing on squash seeds, right? And so, but that comes off, that dries, and that comes off so easy. So you can lay that on a paper towel or a cloth or on a tray or a plate, and let those seeds just dry. Try to get as much of the goop off as you can and just let those dry, and those casings will come off. And people, I forgot to say, like, how long do you wait for seeds to dry? They could be dry anywhere. It depends on our conditions. If it's humid like it is now, or if it's dry like it's in June and September and October. But anywhere from 2 weeks to a month to 2 months. I usually wait about a month before I put my seeds up in something less breathable so that I don't get any mold. I don't want my seeds to mold, right? That's like the big killer. Seeds are so resilient, but the big killer of seeds is mold. And so we want to avoid as much mold as possible. So I wait and let them be open air for as long as I can, which is, I can tolerate them on my countertops or in my line of vision, which is usually about a month. All right, peppers. Peppers are a fun one to save too, because you get to watch the whole life cycle of the pepper plant. So you let it grow, and then it's getting its fruit. The fruit's usually green, turns a color if it's a color one, and then it's going to dry out. And if it's a hot pepper, it's going to dry out usually to a red. And that's the perfect time when it gets a little shrivelly like that to save seeds. You can actually save the seeds for, this is Horizon. I don't know why he has an O on it. This is my husband saving it on a paper towel, but this is a bell pepper, a sweet bell pepper, and it's not past its ripe stage. But if you look at those seeds are ready. You can almost tell they're not paper thin. They've got a bulk to them in the middle. That means they have everything they need. And like Thor Hansen wrote a book about seeds, and it's one of my favorite books on seeds. And he calls it, or he interviewed someone that's called it a baby with a lunchbox. And so those babies have their lunchbox, they're ready to go, even though they haven't reached that drying out past stage. So even if you don't want your seeds to go to the point where you can't use, or if you don't want your peppers to go to the point where you can't use the fruit, the flesh anymore, still save the seeds. But if your goal is to save a seed, like you want to make sure you get as much genetic material from that seed as possible, let them dry out and go to that red shriveled stage, a little bit dry stage. So, all right, melons. So this is a Joni Park melon we grew. It's called an Alibaba, and I believe we still have the seeds in the seed library. They kind of got a little bit popular for a while, and I've I've given away so many, I'm not sure I have them anymore. But I just bought it on a whim because I love the name, from Baker Creek Seeds. Rareseeds.com is one of my favorite bigger seed, family-owned seed companies. Anyway, and so we grow this 21-pound watermelon, among other ones that we didn't even know was possible to do in Joni Park. Simply by just saving seeds over and over again and getting the right varieties for our kind of climate. So even though this was one from the Middle East, we have dry, high desert conditions a lot of times, and it did really well. And there are other melons, like that's a Prescott Fond Blanc, I think, in the bottom there. And it does well, even though it's a French variety. The other one's a farm one. That's another old world variety of honeydew. So the one bottom's a muskmelon, and the other one's like a honeydew melon. They do really well here. So when people say you can't grow melons, you actually can, but just get the right varieties. And it's the same with these ones, using the semi-wet method of saving them. So put them on a cloth, on a plate, or on a paper towel. I use paper towels for the semi-wet ones and for the drying ones, because I can just roll them up and put them in either a paper bag or in a plastic bag, and then I can store them by just filing them in rows and alphabetizing them, so I know where they are and how many I have of each kind of seed. So that's Steve. He's here now. He usually comes and does this presentation with me, but he is at Ariel. He does silks, so he's not here today. All right, so then the wet method. This is the one that people get really scared about, but it's actually a really fun project. And if you have kids or grandkids, it's a great project to do with them. Because what you're doing is you're inoculating these seeds. You're treating them with a fermentation process so that it actually protects them from other seed-borne diseases. And if we were able to meet in public or in person, which hopefully we can someday soon, I would show you how to do this, because it's a really fun project. You just cut up your tomato and you squeeze in the seeds, and you're going to get some of the goo, the inner parts in there too, right? And that's okay, because it's going to fall out the bottom, or they're going to separate the seeds in a lot of ways, in a general area. And then you're going to sieve it after 3 to 5 days. So you're okay. So first, these ones have lids on them. Don't put the lids on them. Leave them out in the open, like that one on the right. You can put a paper towel over it if you want, or cheesecloth if you want. But what you're looking for is that great layer of white mold that's going to happen. You might not even see it depending on the outdoor conditions at the time, right? But 3 to 5 days is about when you can wait. You can probably wait longer. I have some that I've waited longer than that, and they've been totally fine. But once you get to that, then you're going to rinse that off and go through a sieve or a colander, and a fine colander, and remove all of the pulp from the tomato, and leave the seeds. And then the seeds go just back to the semi-wet method, where you're going to put them on a cloth or a paper towel. Actually, I wouldn't recommend a paper towel because it makes them all crusty with tomato seeds and tomatillos and cucumbers. So that you end up with paper towels that you're picking off the seeds because it dries to it. But if you put it on a plate or something that has a smoother surface, then you won't have that problem. Otherwise, we call them like tomato seed cakes, where it's just this big clump of seeds, which still work, but they're not as easy to individually pull them off. So once you put them out there, you strain them, you put them out there, and you let them dry again for about 2 weeks to a month, 2 to 4 weeks. Now, saying this about tomatoes, you can just do the semi-wet method with tomatoes. It's not going to inoculate them, but people think, well, that means that my tomato seeds are going to be no good. If I saw one if I had one in a restaurant I really loved and I kept some seeds, that's not going to work. That's not true. They will work if you decide to pocket seeds, which I do all the time if there's something I really like, because I like experimenting with seeds. But if you just want to save it to the semi-wet method, you can do that. If you have a seed from just a tomato someone gave you and it's wet still, or a tomato that you really like, and you can't do this inoculation method, the wet method, just put them on a paper towel and let them dry. Put them through the colander and get rid of the pulp and as much as you can, and then just let them dry. And again, this is great for tomatillos, cucumbers, tomatoes. Eggplants too, but they're a little harder. I actually don't save eggplant seeds, and I wish I'll have to get back to you all next year and have experienced that a little better, because they are a little harder. You have to wait till the eggplant's really, really ripe to pull those seeds out of the wet method. All right, root vegetables have a second step to them, where you actually save the seeds since they're biennials. That means that they flower the next year. So what you'll do is you can either store them, you can cut down the stalks a little bit and store them in a damp place for the next year. You can store them in a cellar or in some sawdust in a box somewhere cool and slightly damp, or you can just leave them in your garden beds, cover them with mulch, and see what happens the next year. I've had that happen. And actually last year I had some cosmic purple carrots that went to seed in one season. So even though they're biennials, sometimes, and this doesn't happen as much with beets, but even though they're biennials, carrots sometimes can seed that same year. So watch them, and if you're like, oh, they're past the point where they're sweet, just see what'll happen. You might actually get some great seeds out of them. All right, so are there any questions on those varieties of seeds that we talked about and how to save them? That was a pretty fast way to learn. Okay, so let's just talk about how to check viability. This is a worry, and this is especially for my dear friends at the 4th Street Flagstaff Library, because sometimes there comes a point where we think our seeds are no good, right? We think, well, we've been storing them, we don't know how long they'll last, I don't know how good they are. Well, it's a really easy and fun technique, especially with kids and grandkids, to check viability of seeds and germination rates. And there's a really easy way to do that by just taking a paper towel, moisten it. You can do that with a spray bottle and just spray it down the paper towel a little bit, and then put 100 seeds in a grid. So all you do is 10 seeds one way, 10 seeds down the other way, and then fill in that grid. Moisten those seeds again, and then just check them and then cover it so you don't bump them. We usually put them in plastic, like a Ziploc bag, and set it off to the side, and then keep them kind of moist and warm. They actually like to be really warm to germinate. So about 75 to 85 degrees is best for germination rate tests. And then just check it every few days to see if you have any germination going, depending on the seed variety, the seed type. You know, say radishes are really quick. Other herbs are not necessarily. So make sure you know when it should be germinating so that you're not like, oh, it's been 14 days and nothing germinated. Well, it takes lavender longer than that to germinate, things like that. So make sure you check those out. You can check that online, or if you have a package of seeds, it'll say on the packet. And then label it and keep good records of it. And what you'll be able to see is how long seeds, this is what will astonish you, is how long seeds actually last. And now, if you want to check for viability but not lose 100 seeds, no worries. You can just put them in a tray if you're already starting your seeds for that spring, and see what the viability rate is by what seeds you get. All those cute little, I think they're tomatoes. Just by watching those, you'll see what your germination rates are if you put one seed per cube. All right. So here are some kids. This is not my picture. My kids don't like my obsession with seeds, so they're not as fun to hang out with. Plus, when it comes to do germination tests and things, plus they're getting older. But these kids are doing them just in bowls, and so you can do it that way. Just get them a little moist and watch them that way. Just keep them covered so they don't dry out. All right, now we're talking about storing seeds. Now, storing seeds, there's kind of a mantra that we should all remember when we're storing our seeds, and that's cool, dark, dry, cool, dark, dry. And if we can remember those three things, then we can save seeds so much longer than the packets say than we would ever guess. Containers to use, you can really use anything. For a while, I was very anti using plastic, but now sometimes that's easier for me just to take a package of seeds or a group of seeds and just put them in a sandwich sack. And then I put them in ammo boxes so that I can file those in a row. But however you want to do it. I have friends that will only use clay, friends that will only use glass, some that are very anti-plastic, BPA free. It's probably not a problem if you're just going to use that. Just as long as you're keeping them cool, dark, and dry. So what we mean by cool is less than 80 degrees. But the cooler you have them, the longer those seeds will last. So so Seed Savers Exchange is a great organization that you can buy seeds from. And you can also steward seeds for them, which you can also do for Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, the company I work for, the nonprofit I work for. But with Seed Savers Exchange, they have a huge underground facility that they keep sub-zero. I think they keep it freezing. And so they have a lot of seeds in there in storage, and that will last a lot longer because of that. Now, humidity is an issue some places. We really don't have that big of a problem with humidity in Flagstaff. We have these few weeks where it's a little humid, but it's not really going to affect our seed storage. Then the question I usually get is, well, do we put a desiccation packet in those two? No, don't, because they're still organisms, right? They still need some kind of humidity. So we don't want them to get less than 10%. But if it's about 22, that's perfect. If not, as long as there's not enough to create mold, which would be above, I don't know, 40%, 50%. I'm just guessing there. But if you have a dried seed and you're just not putting any other moisture in it, you're going to be just fine. One of the big problems we collaborate with the Seed Temple in New Mexico with Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance and are pests. So if you keep that airtight, then that will protect them. I guess there's more of a worry sometimes with pests, mice, moths, other kinds of insects than a problem with humidity where we live. And so in the Southwest. And so instead of worrying about humidity, think about how you can keep that airtight and away from insects and other pests. I certainly have to worry about mice sometimes in my garage with seeds. And I know our collection, Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, we do have to worry about mice and protecting them in airtight things, or at least some heavy duty plastic bins or jars. So I already talked about the cold storage. Refrigerator or freezer, if you have room, you can keep them in there. In fact, a lot of our native flowers and herbs, and some of our shrubs actually need a vernalization time. They need time to be in the freezing cold. So in a lot of that times, I have seeds in my freezer anyway, just for a limited amount of time. So, all right. So this is a picture of Svalbard in Norway. And speaking of keeping seeds at really cold temperatures, This was created by Carrie Fowles and a lot of help from other nonprofit organizations and countries to save seeds. This is what we would call a seed vault. And this is underneath the glacier in Svalbard, and it protects the seeds indefinitely because they have so long where they can last in perpetuity. And this has actually been such a blessing to so many other countries, like for example Syria. Syria had their huge collection of seeds bombed during the civil unrest lately, and they had a backup set here in Svalbard that they were able to access and still have seeds for their some indigenous seeds. Maybe not indigenous, I don't know if they were for sure, but seeds that were from the area of vegetables and fruits that important to their culture and their food resources. However, you can see the problem with keeping your seeds in a vault like that is that they're not growing out. They're not getting adapted to the conditions. And so just leaving them in perpetuity doesn't really solve that issue where they're saving genetic materials, but is that material changing as our planet changes or our local microclimates change? Not necessarily. So there are other options that would be good as well. And also it's just expensive, and not a lot of us have access to something like that, right? In fact, none of us do except some countries. And then the other thing is with warming, that actually Svalbard melted and they had to do some supplemental cooling, air conditioning in there, and it melted all the way to the door 3 years ago, because it kind of warmed up a little bit. So we'll see how it goes for the next several years. So seed saving, storing seeds. So when you're storing them at home or the office, just think of cool, dark places and dry places that you can store them. Garages sometimes get really hot. Mine does not. So maybe that's not the best place. Basements are great places. Spare fridges might be a great place if you don't mind using the resources of having a plugged-in fridge, a different fridge, or just cupboards or drawers, things that would be a safe place to be for your seeds. The other thing that is kind of great are living seed banks. Then you have your patrons and your volunteers and your friends that all want to share and save seeds. Well, you kind of go around and say, well, you say this seed and you say this seed, and then we'll share it the next year. That's a great way to do it. Greece actually does this. There is a group in Greece, Politi, and they're really neat because there's like 2 million people, I think, that are signed up now at this point. I'm sure not all of them grow all the time, but they get together, they have a big party, and then they share seeds freely because they all have their one seeds, their ambassadors over, and they have committed to growing those seeds out every year so that they have plenty to share. It's a really cool program, and that's what we would call it, the Living Seed Bank. So then there's also seed gardens, community or private gardens, where they're committed to growing out the seeds so that there are seeds in a community all the time. So I kind of hinted on it, but how long can seeds last? And it depends on the species and variety, but also the big answer is we're not sure. We don't know. This is in Israel. Up on those mesas, there used to be all civilizations that relied on date palms. And so what would happen is that the warring tribes would come in onto these mesas and they chop down all the date palms, Judean date palms. And then there would be no source of food. Well, in a pot, in a dry, dark place, an archaeologist found 4 seeds of a Judean date palm, which is extinct now at this point. So he put them in his drawer like a good professor. Sorry, I'm making fun of professors because I used to be one. Would do, put it in a drawer for 40 years and never grew those out. Well, he died and they were cleaning out his office and they found these 4 seeds and thought, well, heck, what the heck? Let's just try and plant them and see what happens. So they take them and they just give them a little bit of green hormone and they put them in the ground. And I think 2 of the 4 actually grew or germinated. And this one actually grew big. And this is Methuselah. It's a male, Judean date palms. Date palms are male-female plants. And so he's a male, and he's from a 2,000-year-old seed that was stored in just the right condition. And Methuselah, I don't have that slide. Methuselah recently, in the last several years, pollinated, let loose some pollen. He actually was mature enough to do that. And they pollinated that with a different kind of date palm, which bore fruit. And so now we're actually getting Judaic date palms again. So the moral of the story is, under the right conditions, our viability of seeds can last much longer than we think. This is the general rule. There's a lot of these different lists you can find all over. This is just one I pulled off the internet. If you notice, onions are kind of the ones to watch for. They don't last as long, but a lot of them last up to this time and usually beyond. So I'm going to talk about the Grow Flagstaff Seed Library really quick. If anyone has any comments or questions right now would be a good time before we get into this topic. Okay, so what's a seed library? We talked about what a seed vault is. We talked about a living seed library. We talked about other seed repositories, but a seed library is different in that it's an institution that lends or shares seeds. It is distinguished from a seed bank in that the main purpose is not to store or hold seeds against possible destruction, but to disseminate them to the public, which preserves the shared plant varieties through propagation and further sharing of seeds. So that's a mouthful to say that it's a seed, almost a living seed bank that goes to the people. And then some organizations, such as the East Flagstaff Seed Library, shares them and collects them all up and shares them again to go back out into the group. So this is where the Grow Flagstaff Seed Library is, inside of the Coconino County Cooperative Extension Office, which is there on 3rd Street, right across the street from Killip Elementary. Now, we also have, since COVID, we've put a big kiosk outside the door. I think I might have a picture, nope, of it, but it's outside. And so you don't necessarily have to go inside to check the drawers there, but there are a lot of seeds outside available now too. The only thing is that to make sure that you need to make sure that you sign up. It's free. And just so that we know that who is using and what is getting taken so that we can replace those things. So this is kind of how it works. So like I said, a free membership form, you fill out the form, and I need to work on getting that one online for those that are a little more tech savvy that would rather that rather than a paper form, leaving their information in a 3-ring binder. That could be a different way to do it. And kind of it's all on the honor system. And from there, you can take 5 packets per time you visit for free. And that's only just so that people are not just taking a bunch of seeds that they're not going to plant, but rather they're committed enough to come again and again to get packets of seed and plant them out. They're smaller sized groups, and so sometimes maybe a packet of 10 beans isn't enough, so maybe you want 5 packets of 10 beans. That's just because we don't know what amount people want to grow, and so they're usually smaller groupings of seeds per packet, and they'll say on them how many. So then you write down in that same 3-ring binder what you took, the varieties. So we know what varieties are there, and not just saying I took okra, but what kind of okra. I took the purple okra, or what the name is, like scarlet runner beans, not just a bean. So we know. And then there's no penalty to save the seeds, but it's definitely encouraged, and something that we really want to get to, because we want to make sure that those seeds are returned year after year so we can get all those benefits that we talked about of the genetic information stored year after year for Flagstaff area, for Coconino County, on what kind of seeds we're growing, and that information of how well they do there every year saved inside the seed, not in paper. Although when they're returned, I love receiving ones that have some great documentation about where they were grown, how they did, like all that information. We keep that and we use it. So, but I'll just be grateful if people return seeds and tell me what it is. So, all right. And it's organized. Oh, look, down there below is kind of what it looked like at the kiosk outside. Now it's even expanded. There's even more than just the little cute blue magazine file. There's also a whole table, even more than those ammo boxes, full of seeds to choose from. And you can go inside as well. I just know that people sometimes can't make it to the seed library at the 9 to 4 hours, Monday through Friday. And so now outside, I know it's getting a lot of use when they don't have to go inside. So how it's organized is alphabetized. is so it's based on common name, not scientific name. So I have botany degrees, and I get a little weird about scientific names. So I'm sorry if sometimes they're confusing, but and on the packages, but there will always be the common name, even if there's the scientific name as well. So common name, and then they're also separated into, so outside they're separated by cold season and herb, flower, native, warm season, things like that. But inside they're only separated by vegetables, and then natives, herbs, and flowers. And so there are two sections, and then they're all by common name. So it goes from asparagus and artichoke all the way down to zucchini. And then inside of those, say you go into zucchini, then they're alphabetized by what varieties. So Black Beauty zucchini is before the Coccozelli. So that's how that's set up. And then if you need more information about growing, there's stuff on the packets, but it's also on the dividers. And even more, I just encourage people to Google. You can find anything you want to know about varieties of seeds anymore just by Googling them. And I mean, that's where I go to fill out the variety stamps on them anyway, the packet stamps that say about growing them. Otherwise, I just go online and get all that information. And then also, if they're marked with a green circle sticker, that means they're an easy one to save, like the 5 groupings we talked about. If they have a red one, they're a little difficult to save, and that's usually because they can cross-pollinate. And if you're worried about things cross-pollinate, but you still want to save them, which I hope you do, try, is just grow only that variety. Like, for instance, corn, they figure that corn, because it's wind pollinated, it needs to be about a quarter mile away from another kind of corn, so that if you don't want them to cross. It's okay if you do want them to cross, but if you don't want them to cross, then you keep them that far away. Well, most of us can't keep our corn that far away and in big clumps of corn like it requires to grow ears on them. So just grow one variety of corn, or separate them by a huge building or a huge fence or something, that the pollen's not going to go through. And usually that's what I do, is I grow only like Painted Mountain one year, or only Glass Gem another. So I won't mix them, although I know a lot of people that like to mix them on purpose to get varieties suited to their area. So we also do seed packing days, which are great opportunities to come and talk gardening and to volunteer and get to know other gardeners in the area. And we do this at the county extension office right across from Killip every 4th Thursday. And we're starting this Thursday, the first time we haven't been since COVID. So starting now, not January, but starting July from 10, and it's actually 10 to 1. And you can follow us on our Facebook page to know what's going on, what's happening. And lovely Leslie's here, and she has been really amazing this last week, keeping things going on the Facebook page. Information about what we're doing, plus just some gardening gee whiz or gardening information. So go ahead and like that page, and you'll get some great information there. And I don't think I have any last thoughts. This is the Shan Garden in EU. When I was teaching botany there, we were in charge of this garden. And it was just really neat to see students get excited about saving seeds and how easy it can be when we just try. And like I said, what's the worst thing that could happen? You see those crazy squash, which I forgot to mention. If you're going to save seeds from squash, make sure it's a mature squash. So wait until it gets that over big, starting to color, get lumpy stage. Those are the ones that you want to save the seeds from. I forgot to mention that. So like my foot here shows those big old zucchini you don't know what to do with. Those are your perfect ones for seeds. And usually when my kids were little, I would let them take them down, hollow them out, and we would have boat races down Oak Creek with them too after I stole all the seeds out of them. So what's the worst thing that can happen? You have weird pumpsinis, right, for dinner. So we can't keep these seed libraries going alone, both at the 4th Street Flagstaff Library and at the Grove Flagstaff. So we really need your patronage, and we really need creative ways for you to think of that you can be involved, especially by saving seeds and returning seeds as you can. So get out there and try what you can. And that doesn't really apply. And here's some resources on saving seeds. Books are a great thing. Like I said, Google, you can find anything you want just by looking it up online. But these are all some great books that I always recommend for seed saving. Some of these you can go and peruse at the 4th Street, or not, excuse me, not the 4th Street Seed Library, but the Grow Flagstaff Seed Library. There's quite a collection of books at the top of those filing cabinets with the seeds that you can go and check out and look into. And I'm sure the 4th Street Library has some seed books too that you can go and check out from the library to learn more about seed saving. So if anyone is willing to open this up and just talk about things that they've struggled with or have had hesitations about saving seeds about.
You know, this is Leslie here. I've never done it, so I'm getting excited about trying it.
Yay, that's what I like to hear. It's okay if you've never done it. Go ahead, Diane.
Yeah, basically the same thing. I have been thinking about it. I'm actually really new to gardening, and this has been a real adventure trying to do it here.
Yeah.
Yes. But I love the idea of saving seeds that have acclimated to our environment. That's that's just really cool. Yeah. So I'm excited to try that.
Cool. Future generations will thank you for trying.
Let's hope so.
And I had a question, Jackie.
Yeah, please.
You mentioned an author who'd authored one of your favorite books to read, but I don't think I caught the name of your favorite book. It was by Thor Hansen.
Yeah, so THOR, and I think it's HANSSON. Let me see if I can look it up really quick.
Okay.
And thank you for the comment in the chat about first-year gardening. I'm always so excited to see first-year gardeners that are so brave to say, I can do this, or I'm going to try this. It took me several years to be brave, and like I said, it became a hoarding thing before I finally got into saving seeds. So it's the Triumphant Seeds, and it's Thor Hansen, and it's HANSON. The Triumph of Seeds.
Great, thank you.
I wish I could remember the researcher that he talked to that called it a baby with the lunchbox, but I can't remember her name. He was quoting her. And then what the name of the Facebook page is again, let's see, maybe I can, I should stop share. Sorry about that, Michelle. Maybe I can look it up really quick, but it's just Grow Flagstaff Seed Library. If you look that up, it should come right up for you.
Liked on my Facebook too. Let's see if I can.
I have a new computer, and so I'm really, not only has the internet been crazy, but just trying to navigate this new computer. So I apologize.
So this is Grow.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, you got Facebook page.
And I think you have a Facebook page too, right? For 4th Street. That you put stuff about the seed library on?
It's just for the Flagstaff Public Library, but let's see. They do updates for both branches of the library.
Okay, so not just one specifically.
Right.
You know, I tried for years to get the main library to put a seed library in there, so I can't tell you how awesome you ladies are.
Aw. Well, we're very excited about seeds too, and offering them as a resource to the community. So that's the Flagstaff Public Library's Facebook page if you guys are interested. And I think, does anybody have any other questions or comments?
Well, you have my slides. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I just really appreciate your presentation, and this was really fun. Thank you both for your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jackie. That was a
of course
wonderful presentation, very informative. I learned a lot. So,
well, anytime. I'll talk about seeds all day.
Okay. Well,
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I'll stop recording.